the top 10 teachings of the 12th page of Brachos. The first teaching, which I already had a chance to put on to a recording, I will go it over really quickly, is why we no longer read the Aseres HaDibros as part of the synagogue service in the Shema, or connected to the Shema. And I already talked about it, but I'll just add on one thing that I found that was interesting that wasn't in my earlier video, which is in the Ashkenaz community. In the Ashkenaz community, the custom is to stand during the reading of the Aseres. I believe he takes issue with that, and he says that standing would give the wrong impression that we value this particular part of the Torah more than the other part, and perhaps people would misunderstand it as they do in our Gemara and think that the claim could be made that that's the sacred part of the Torah and the other part isn't. The Ashkenaz, in a sense, some people see it as an extrapolation of this Gemara, like treating the Ten Commandments in any way different could lead people to misunderstand their place. They are significant, but they are not unique in the sense that all of the Torah is considered as if it was given by Moses at Sinai, even though we didn't literally hear it all during the Ten Commandments. So the Ashkenazic response, or Moshe talks about that, is they don't understand that this prohibition in regards to reciting the Aseres HaDibros as part of the Ten Commandments do extend into other areas. In fact, in many Sidurim, it's mentioned to recite the Aseres HaDibros every day. Anyway, that's just a little add-on for number one, but now we're going to go to number two, and that's a question of, is misintention worse than no intention at all? And what I'm talking about here, I'm going to show it to you in the Gemara, is that there's a debate many times in the Gemara and the Talmud about if mitzvos need kavanah, if they need intention or not. Certainly, even the opinion that says they don't need intention would require something at some point. What that is depending on what it is. There's various discussions. So, for example, if somebody's reading, they'd have to know that they're reading. They couldn't be, let's say, asleep and saying something in their sleep, because then they wouldn't really be reading. They wouldn't fulfill their obligation. If they think they're editing and reading it in a non-readable way, for example, for the Shema, even the opinion that would say that you don't need intention, that still would not fulfill your obligation. So again, this is a discussion that happens at many occasions. But generally, when we have any statement by a Tana or an Amora, unless we know very clearly that they don't believe, or that they believe that mitzvahs need kavanah, we'll try to reconcile it into both opinions: the opinion that mitzvahs do need intention, or that they don't need intention. We'll try to reconcile it. So here in our Gemara, we say the following. Now I keep pressing the wrong buttons here. Here we go. So our Gemara says the following. I see I put the flashlight on in case it gets dark, because I'm out in California here. So somebody's asking me why we're ahead 1 week, because I know I'm going to fall behind. So the Gemara says, read it over here. Pshita hechad kanakit kasa dechamra biyade. Somebody's holding on to a cup of wine. Ukasavar deshichrahu, and he thinks it's shahakal, like beer. Upasach mevarach adaita deshichra, and he starts making the blessing. He says Baruch ata Hashem Elokeinu, and that whole time he's thinking that it's a shahakal, that is beer. V'sayim b'dechamer. But then he looks into the cup and he realizes it's wine, and he makes Borei Pri Hagafen, he makes a hagafen, then we say yatsa. Why is that? The Gemara will explain. Di nami im amar shehakol niya bidvaro yatsa. Because the truth is, it's very simple. Had he made a shehakol, even though the shehakol is not generally made on wine because wine has a unique blessing, but if you did in fact make a shehakol on wine, you would fulfill your obligation. Let me give you a little introduction to brachot, to the idea of a bracha, because that's a big part of Masechtas Brachos. A bracha, the category of bracha that we're referring to now is birchas hanenin, which means a blessing that you're going to get a enjoyment for something, and with a particular focus on food items. There are a few other things that are not eating that fall into that category, but for now we're focused on food items. There are a variety of different brachas that you make. So for what you need to know now, for example, is there's a bracha that you make for liquid in general, which is shehakol, niyeh b'dvaro, that God made everything. And then there's another special bracha we make on wine, because wine is unique. Wine is the only type of drink that we improvement when grapes are turned into wine. That's like the chashivus, the value and quality of a grape is in its wine. And therefore we make a borei pri hagafen, who creates the fruit of the vine. So why do we have specific blessings and general blessings? The shehakol is for all liquids. Shehakol would also be on anything that didn't grow from the ground. So anything that's meat, eggs, cheese, poultry, fish, all of those items are shehakol. All liquids are shehakol. There are other things that when they're overly processed, even though they grew from the ground, but they're not really recognizable as what they are, they will also often turn into a shehakol. Shehakol is the generic. The question is, if the generic, theoretically, if you don't know the blessing, if you're traveling and you don't have your internet isn't working and you can't find out, you don't have the right access to the resources of something that you're not sure whether it's, for example, you read the ingredients, it's got like, wheat and corn and this and that in it, but it's not really clear that it's a cookie, or perhaps it's not really a cookie, it's something else, and you don't know, do I make it has as much a flour in it, and it's confusing, right? It's some type of breakfast cereal, right, that's got a mix of corn and wheat and other things and sugar. So in theory, since you don't know, you should find out. But if you can't find out, if you made a shehakol, you fulfilled your obligation. So the question is, if you really fulfill your obligation by making a shehakol, because that covers, in theory, anything you don't know, or even if by accident you made a shehakol, you don't have to make it. You're not required. You wouldn't be allowed to make another blessing. Let's say you waited and waited and waited to hear back from your rabbi, and you make a shehakol, and a second later he texts you, it's a mizonot. You don't go back and make a bracha. You already fulfilled your obligation. You're good. So that's a prerequisite to understanding our Gemara. But the question is why? And the simple answer is like this. We have hakaras hatov. We have a gratitude for the variety of things that God gives us. It's better if we could recognize the specific category, maybe not the subcategory, but at least the general category of the gift that we're receiving. So, for example, I'm sitting under a beautiful guava tree that in the season produces hundreds, maybe thousands of guavas. And when you make a blessing on a guava, you want to make a blessing on borei pri ha'etz. It's a fruit of the tree. If, for example, there's tomatoes there, tomatoes are also growing on so we can do show and tell here. Look at the tomatoes. Look like they're growing on a shrub that could be a tree, right? You see that? But the rabbis say this is a bush. I don't know. I'm not giving. I don't know what it's. I didn't Google what a tomato thing is. It's not a tree. How not a tree? You make a ha'adama. On the other hand, when you have something like I don't know what is that? It looks like little oranges, kumquats. It's not a big tree, but it's a tree. It's ha'etz. Here, I think there's a srogan. Look at that. I think we're getting into the esrog business. I don't know. Wow, look, that's pretty amazing. Well, that would be ha'etz. And little show and tell. My mother works hard on this garden. Here we have an orange tree. That's very clearly ha'etz. That's a tree. So you want to recognize where the thing came from. It came from a tree. You bless God who makes fruits of the tree. Fruits are wonderful. You're having a tomato. You want to recognize it's a vegetable. You make a hadama. It's a halachic vegetable. I don't know. Sometimes the word vegetable for hadama is not the same as the word vegetable in the scientific terminology. They don't always overlap. The point is that you want to get specificity. I'm not saying it right. When you can't get too specific, then it's okay to make a shahakol. So, for example, a fish, right? A fish, you're not. It's not a fruit. It's not a vegetable. So, it's part of the generic wholeness that is in the world. So you make a shahakol. In this case, when you make the blessing, and you make the blessing on the grape juice, what would be wrong? First of all, do you even need kavanah? Right? Do you even need intention at all? And the answer is maybe, maybe not. It's a machlokas. It's a debate. But what you can't have is misintention, and we're going to continue with that in mind and read further in the Gemara. Okay, what does the Gemara say further? Well, I'll quote a brisa, which is just reiterating what we just said. The Hatznan al kulam, on any food item and anything. Im omar shahakol niya bidvara. If you say the blessing of shahakol, that everything is from created by your word, yatsa, you'd fulfill your obligation. So what is the question then? Elahecha de kanakit kasa de shichra. The person is holding a cup of beer. He must have had a couple drinks, that's why he's not looking inside. Ubarich adaita dechamer, but he asked somebody to get him a drink, right? So they probably not a glass, it's probably some other type of cup, like a kiddush becher, and he thinks it's wine, but it isn't. And he starts making the bracha Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu, and he looks down and he sees it is not wine. He thought he was going to make a hagafen, and then he sees it's beer, v'siyam b'deshikra, and he concludes with a proper blessing for the beer, shahakol mai. The question is then, do we say basar ikar bracha aslan? Do we go after the ikar bracha, the core of the bracha? What's the core? The core is the actual acknowledging of God as the source of what the person's enjoying. Baruch means blessing, but it also means to draw down from a source, like the word for bracha is bricha in Hebrew, which means a pool, which means something that takes something from some place A and brings it to a second place B. In the sense of the divine, God is the sustaining source, that from that source he brings down, he draws down from that vitality, that gift, into the universe to provide us with the specific thing. Ata, you, directly to God. Hashem, Elokeinu, the God that is our God, the God that gives life to my neshama. Melech haolam, whose principles and being administer every element and aspect of the universe. Right? And then, while you were saying that, you're thinking, that's the Ikar HaBracha, that's the main bracha. And you're thinking it's what? You're thinking it is wine. What's the problem with that? you didn't finish the bracha. The distinguishing factor in the bracha is really the last words. So who cares about what you were thinking about? Well, here's who cares. Since you thought the wrong thing, misintention is worse than no intention. Let's look in the Rashi. Ella on Pesach the person thought it was wine, and he was thinking when he began the blessing that it was hagafen. However, when he comes to the word melech ha'olam, niskar, he realizes that it is in fact beer, v'siyim shahakol, and he concludes with a shahakol mahu. What's the question? The Rashi explains. Basa ikar brachas. And did we go after the core of the bracha? What is that? The ikar habracha, the core of the bracha, we explained is Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu, is adaita de yayin number. It was said with the intention of wine, the wrong intention. V'havikemo shasim beyayin. It's as if he concluded the blessing, even though he didn't. But since in terms of the important part of the blessing was with wine in mind. The blessing for wine doesn't cover the blessings for other liquids like beer. Because beer is not grapes. It's not from grapes. So that's the question. Okay, so that's number 2. Is misintention worse than no intention? And the Gemara basically says, it goes other cases, which is part of what number 3 is, which is comparing bread to dates and other mix-ups in blessing. So one of the cases the Gemara brings here is as follows. Shachris, if the person in the morning Pasach b'yotze'ar, he begins the blessing of yotze'ar, which is correct. But then he concludes with the evening prayer for the that refers to the evening. Lo yatza, he doesn't fulfill his obligation. Pasach b'mayav ha'aravim, but if he begins the morning prayer with reference to the evening, v'siyim b'yotze'ar, but he concludes with the correct thing about the daytime, about the creator of light, yatza, he doesn't fulfill his obligation. Arvis, in the evening, pasach b'mayav ha'aravim, if he begins correctly with mayav ha'aravim, v'siyim b'yotze'ar, but then he finishes the blessing incorrectly with the morning prayer of the creator of light, lo yatza. Pasach b'yotze'ar v'siyim b'mayav ha'aravim, if he started incorrectly at night and finished it correctly, yatza, he fulfills his obligation. The general principle is we go after the conclusion. From this, it would seem that the reconciliation of this question is that we just look at the end, not the beginning. The Gemara answers no. That's not the case. It doesn't prove anything in the we can't transfer this information to the case of the wine that was actually beer. Why not? Shani Hassan. The case of davening is different. To come a Brachos ma'oros, because at the conclusion the person is saying, "Blessed are the luminaries, the sun and the moon." The Gemara asks a question and it gives an answer, but here's the bottom line. This is the final answer in this little piece, not for the whole piece, but this on saying why you can't compare it. Is in the name of Bar Ula, the main objective when you're making the morning or evening prayer is to create the distinction between morning and evening, to mention in the morning that there's a morning and there's also an evening, and to mention in the evening that there's an evening and there's also a morning. In other words, you have to include both elements, both attributes, both parts of the 24-hour period, the day and the night. As long as you do that, then you really fulfilled your obligation. So you can't really compare it to the case of the wine and the beer, because there you have really fulfilled your obligation. So the question would be, back to our original question about our case about the grape juice and the wine and the beer. Ki ka'amar bracha omachos mi'ikara, when the person made the original part of the blessing with the name of God, atavayo ka'amar. I'm sorry, that's going on. I believe that's going on. That in other words, that's explaining why that's okay in the case of davening, because it's going on both day and night. So the Gemara is going to try to prove from somewhere else. Tashma Seifa, the end of that teaching says, Klalo shel davar hakodosh chitam. It says, it ends off with this statement. It always goes after the conclusion by a blessing. What is klal shel davar? When you're saying it's a general principle, la'asur, what are we including that's not already stated? Lav la'asur hadamran. Perhaps it's to say the exact case that we were talking about of the wine, and that was actually speaking about, and it goes after the conclusion. And since the conclusion was a shahakal, the person would be fine. The Gemara says, lo, that is not what it's talking about. La'asuye nama vitamri. It's coming to include bread and dates. Hechadami, what's the case of bread and dates? It's a similar case of confusion. Ilem achal nama kasavar ditami achal. Is it talking about he ate bread but he thought it was dates? I don't know what this guy's on. A pasach hadaite ditami v'siyim b'denama. And when let's say he's making a bracha achrona, he's doing after blessing. I know it's hard to concentrate with all this noise. I hear you. This is because everybody has a backyard, and there's no peace of mind in the suburbs. Everybody has somebody working on their backyards all the time. Noise pollution. Get used to it. It's not going anywhere. Okay. So what's this case? So the case is the guy ate dates. No, he ate bread. He thought it was dates, and he says Baruch Atah Hashem. He's going to make a bracha achron. He's going to make a blessing afterwards, and he thinks he's going to make al ha'etz. Right? There's a special after blessing for fruits that are the special fruits that Eretz Yisrael is praised with, which the dates are one of them. And he starts making the bracha with dates in mind, but then he looks down and he's like, no, I didn't have dates. By the way, the older I get, the more I understand these Gemaras, because the older I get, the more confused I get, and the more easily mixed up I am. Even if I just ate something, I could forget. If what did I eat? I think it was something else. So I'm beginning to relate more to this Gemara. When I was younger, I'm like, what is the Gemara talking about? Now it's just talking about old people like me. So he starts this thing, but then it's bread, and he says, and he starts saying the full on a berchas hamazon for bread. So this says Hainu be'en. That's fine. So what would be the case? What would be the case? He ate dates, but he thought it was bread. Pasach b'denahama. He starts saying Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam hazan. He doesn't say hazan. He thinks he's about to say berachas hamazon for bread, but then he looks down and he sees its dates. And he says ala eitz v'al priya eitz. Dafilu siyam b'denahama nami yatsa. That then we say that even if Even if he would have concluded with the regular full-on birchas hamazon for bread, he would still fulfill his obligation. My time, and what's the reason? The tam rinami mezin zayne. The Gemara says that's different because bread, because even dates give you sustenance. So even usually use the full-on birchas hamazon for bread, only for bread, but essentially it's not really that different. It's about mizonos, it's about sustenance. So in theory, if you made a mistake and you made the full-on birchas hamazon, let's say you did make the birchas hamazon for eating a fruit meal, you had fruit bread, and it was really made out of fruits, it wasn't made out of the grain, and by accident you made a regular benching, you don't have to go back and make a second benching on it because you really fulfill your obligation for that. So in that sense, it's still okay. So that's number 3, comparing bread to dates and other mix-ups and blessings. Number 4, to tell your kindness in the morning and your faithfulness at night. Okay, what is that? The Gemara says, Amar Rabba Bar Chinina Saba Mishmei Derav. Kol Shul Amar Emes V'Yatziv. Whoever doesn't say Emes V'Yatziv, that's the prayer that comes right after the Shema, after the third paragraph of the Shema, Shachris. The one that comes after Shachris is called Emes V'Yatziv. The Emes V'Emuna, the one that comes after Mariv, Arvis, at night, Lo Yotzei Chavaso, does not fulfill their obligation. In other words, that bracha relates to a certain element of what we're trying to do when we say the Shema, and if you don't say it, you don't fulfill. Again, what part of your obligation don't you fulfill? It's not that you didn't fulfill Kriya Shema, or that you didn't fulfill the mentioning the Yitzias Mitzrayim. It's more that there's a certain rabbinic kiyum, rabbinic way that they established to fully actuate some element of what these brachas effectuate, I guess. Is that the word? Actuate, I'm making up words here. Why is that? Shenemar lahagid baboker chastecha ve'emunascha ba'leilos, to talk about your kindness in the morning and your faithfulness in the evening. There's a very important Rashi here. What does Rashi tell us? What do we talk about in the morning in the bracha emes v'yatziv? We talk about the kindness that God did with our forebears when He took us out, Shotziim and Mitzrayim. He took us out of Egypt, Ubaka lehem hayam, and He split the sea for us, V'avirim, and He passed us through there. And the other bracha that we say in the evening, Brachos Emes V'Amuna, Medaber Ba Af Al Hasidus, is also talking about the future. She'anu Mitzapin, that we are waiting for, She'yikayim Lanu Haftachaso V'Manaso L'Galenu, that He will fulfill His Haftacha, His promises, and we have faith that He will redeem us in the future, Miyamalachim, from any harsh situations, from governments that are oppressing us, and Yadaritzim. Wow. So it's two things. One is that God will bring the Mashiach in the right time, but it's also that He will take us out of difficult times. If there's a anti-Semitic and Jews are not safe, God will save us in the long run. Again, the short run, I don't know how we reconcile this with all the terrible things that are happening. We can't always reconcile it in a simplistic way that this prayer will ensure that nothing bad ever happens. But it's a prayer of faith. It's a prayer that we do have faith. Faith doesn't mean that that we don't take actual means of doing specific things to ensure that we have the right outcome based on action, but it means we also have faith in God, that even the right action will only work because that ultimately God will help us in our way. So that's the difference between Boker, the morning, when we talk, in other words, when you just say the Shema, and you just say, Ani Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt, in the third paragraph of the Shema, you're not recognizing the uniqueness of day and the uniqueness of night. Part of what we're trying to do when we make a blessing. Okay, I'm going to tell you what this is really about. Really, my friends, the rabbis are trying to awaken in us particularism. I'm not just talking about that I'm a Jew. No, I'm talking about that it's day now, or that it's night now. What does it mean that it's day? A day means when things are good for me. What do I have to remember when things are good? That I'm only here. It's only good because God took me out in the past. Otherwise, they would never be good. So that's why in the morning is a metaphor for good. When I see the good that's seen, the sunlight, I see it's good. Okay, it's beautiful. It's 60 degrees. It was 25 degrees, and now I'm here at 60 degrees. Okay, it's wonderful. So then I have to remember when I make a joke that what does a Jew in Miami do the whole time? He's checking the weather every hour to see what the weather is, not in Miami, but in New York. And that's a very Jewish thing, because you want to thank God that you're in Miami. The more cold it is in New York, the more able you're to say, Lahagid baboker chasecha, thank you for taking me out of the cold and bringing me into the warmth. So that's pshat, in to recount God's kindness in the morning. When things are good, remember that it wasn't always good, and God was kind to you, and He took you out, and He made it good for you. What about when it's bad? Then you have to remember, you have to have faith in the future, that even though it doesn't look good right now, but in the future, God has saved us and will continue to save us from our predicaments. Okay, so that's number 4. Number 5 is bowing is not exactly yoga, but body in service of the divine intention. I'm wondering how. Okay, so what are we talking about here? Let me explain to you something very, very important. A lot of people. Hey, are you? I'm doing a shir online. You're welcome to join me. Yeah, my brother just came. What's up?
You hear me?
Yeah. Yeah, sit and learn. Anyway, so. Yeah, okay, I'll come in soon. What is this thing about bowing? So we all know we're busy davening. Everybody thinks that davening is something we do with our mouths. But the truth is, it says, Kol atzmosei tomar Hashem michamocha. All of our limbs, all of our bones proclaim who is like you, God. In other words, real prayer, your body has to get into the prayer. It can't just be coming from your lips. It's got to come from the heart. It's got to come into song, and it's got to come into your body. That's what the Baal Shem Tov says, that swaying in davening is because it's a form of divine intimacy with God. You're driven to want to be closer to the Ribbon Shalom. Okay? So here, there's another aspect. At certain points in the davening, we bow. We don't bow all the way to the ground, but we bend at our knees and our waist, and then we get back up. Baruch, we bend at the knees. Ata, we bend at the waist. Hashem, we get back up. So there's a certain way that we bow, halachically, right? Baruch, Ata, and then we get up at Hashem. But when you bow down quicker. I think Rashi says like a rod that goes straight down. You go down quick, and when you get up, so here it'd be like this, boom, and then getting up, it'd be more like slowly. So the language the Gemara uses is Korea bebaruch. You bow at Baruch. Ukushuzokev, when you get up, b'shem, at the name of God. And Amar Shmuel, my time, what's the reason? Nechsiv Hashem zokev kfufim. God, you stand up those who are bent. I'm going to pause this.